Good evening. Turn to John chapter 13, please. John chapter 13. And last week we got to the part of the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper, where he is telling his disciples what's going to happen to him. And we got all the way to about 35. We finished, 25. We finished 25, and he says, Simon Peter therefore beckoned him, verse 24, that he should ask who it be of whom he spake. Now, what he's referring to is up in verse 21. It says, Verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. So the disciples are asking, they're pondering within themselves about who it's going to be. They all ask, is it I, is it I, is it I? All of the disciples, with the exception of Judas, asks, is it I? Lord, is it I? And Judas says, Master, is it I? And we find that by running through some other verses in the other Gospels, okay? But Jesus answered them in verse 26. Now, I know last week I talked to you about the SOP, S-O-P, being the son, an acrostic for the son of perdition and how it's tied to Judas Iscariot. Now, that's a real fun and real interesting study. Unfortunately, I could not find any of my notes in regards to that, so I just didn't have time to put it all together today, because that's going to take some time to put it all together again. Maybe we'll go over that when Judas hangs himself in chapter 18 or so, because that has something to do with it, right? So, go ahead.
They still don't eat food in the Middle East with utensils.
What does that have to do with anything that I just said?
Sop.
Oh, the sop. Okay. I was like, I'm having trouble putting those two things together.
Yeah,
Okay.
that hunk of bread.
Yes, the sop.
They use to bring it
Sop. So he dips the sop in whatever it is, whether it was some sort of gravy or broth or even just something flavorful. Could be couscous, whatever it is, But anyway, he dips that sop and he gives it, So the Greeks do this to this day. They use a pita bread, and they dip it in a cream sauce, tzatziki, right? Sauce. That's the same thing, right? So it was a symbol. It was just something for him to say, well, we're going to get into this. It's whom I dip this sop to and I give it to, and then he tells Judas to go do what he's going to go do, right? So that sop is an acrostic for S-O-P, meaning son of perdition, right? And that is tied to Judas Iscariot. And we're going to, off the top of my head, there's some things that are very similar between Judas Iscariot being tied to the sop, son of perdition, and the son of perdition being called the Antichrist, that man of sin. So there's going to be some similarities between Judas Iscariot and the Antichrist. And we can run to Job when we do that, and where it talks about Kerioth. Iscariot is not Judas's last name. Iscariot means the man from Kerioth, right? Kerioth is in Moab or Syria, right? So we know the Antichrist is we know Judas is a Jew. And we know that the Antichrist is probably going to have Assyrian and Jewish blood. He's going to be an Assyrian Jew, so he's a half-breed. We know that he's going to have a bad right eye and a bad right arm, and that he's going to be resurrected. And there's a whole lot of verses we can run in Revelation chapter 19 and Revelation chapter 20 talking about the son of perdition and the Antichrist being resurrected, the assassination attempt that's going to happen on the Antichrist, the whole 9 yards. And we'll get into that. I just don't have all of my notes in front of me, so I can't give you all the references. But that's a real interesting study. Maybe we'll get to it when we do the, when we get to the hanging or the suicide of Judas, right? All right, but this is where we get to verse 26. It's where we left off. And Jesus answered, he said, He it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. So, and when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Okay, so again, I don't believe that everybody at the table heard this, and if they heard it, they certainly didn't understand it. Okay? John was probably the only one who was in close enough proximity to hear it and really get what Jesus was saying, but I don't think he really understood what Jesus was saying, and that is evident in a couple of verses where he didn't really understand what he was doing. Judas, however, was close enough for him to hear it, right? If it's me, I think Jesus kind of leaned into Judas a little bit, and he says, "It's the one that I dipped this sop and give it to," right? He just talks to Judas real quick, and then he ends up dipping the sop and he gave it to Judas, and Judas then realizes that it's him. Okay, now up until this point, it's important to understand. Up until this point, Judas was a trusted member, right? Still is, right? And he told those things to Judas at a minimum. And again, maybe John heard it, but if John heard it, he certainly did not understand what was being said, as evidence in verse 28. But verse 27. And after the sop, Satan entered into him, and said Jesus unto him, "That thou doest, do quickly." Okay? So after Jesus gave Judas the sop, right, Satan entered into Judas. Now, once Jesus recognized this, Jesus can see some things that we can't see, right? He has some spiritual sense that we ain't got a clue about, right? Once Jesus recognized this, he gave the command, "Go and do what you're going to do, and do it now. Go do it quickly." Now the question, was Judas a child of Satan? And the answer to a side question of that is yes. Yes, Satan has a seed. Okay, there is that. So he could have been a physical child of Satan, right? It does say in John chapter 6, verse 20, that one of the disciples is a devil, right? So you can say that, and I guess I wouldn't have any problem. Well, I couldn't really say a whole lot about it, right? He possibly is an actual devil, seed of Satan, right? The key word is a devil and not the devil, right? It says Satan entered into him here. Okay, so he certainly wasn't Satan until Satan entered into him here. But he was a devil. Now, if you want to take that literally, you can. There is a slight problem with that, though. If you look in Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. Someone go to Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. And I want you to read that. Well, we'll all go there. Matthew 16, 23. If you want to make it literal, I mean, you can't just be picking and choosing, right? Let's look at Matthew 16, 22. And Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, "Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee." This is Peter rebuking Jesus Christ. And it says in verse 23, "But he turned," who? He, Jesus, turned and said unto Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto thee," right? So if we're going to take that seriously, that Judas was a devil, you kind of have to be serious that Peter was the devil, not a devil. What's more likely is that the spirit of Satan, or was possessed with a devil, is something that happened, right? So I don't think Peter was actually Satan standing there. He says, "I see Satan speaking through you. Get thee behind me, Satan," right? When he said, I have now not chosen you 12, and yet one of you is a devil, I don't think he was actually a devil. I think he had a devil speaking through him, right? That's speculation. It does say that one of them is a devil. So you could take that literally, and I couldn't argue with it. But then again, he called Peter Satan, so you have to kind of try to find out where that is, because Peter wasn't actually Satan. We know that, right? So that's kind of what do we do with that, right? So he certainly recognized that something had happened to Judas, and he gave a command, right? And he was telling the devil what to do. So the best way to kind of reconcile that is maybe there was a spirit of Satan or an unclean spirit who said those things at some point. See, Satan is not like God in the respect that Satan is not omnipotent, right? He's not all-powerful. Our God is all-powerful, is he not? He can do anything that he says he can do. Now, there are some things he cannot do in the respect that he limits himself. But that's the only reason he does not or is not capable of doing those things, is because he limits himself. It's the same thing with omniscient. He knows everything. He has the ability to know everything except for those things that he limits himself to. I'm glad he does this, because he says, my sins are in a burlap sack, and he casts them over his shoulder into the depths of the sea, and he doesn't know them, right? I'm glad he does that. The reason he does that is because, when he sees me, he doesn't see me, he sees his son, right? And I'm glad he limits his omniscience, right? Now, Satan does not know everything. The Lord is omnipresent. He has the ability to be anywhere and everywhere all at the same time, right? Satan does not have that ability to do that. So if Satan is in Peter, he's not somewhere else. If Satan is in Judas, he's not somewhere else. He's dealing directly with Judas at this time. And he simply doesn't have the capability of doing such things. Now, he does have his little cronies, his minions, that do those things for him. So he often has other people, other demons or other imps, other unclean spirits, other whatever you want to call them, right? Doing his dirty work. He cannot be in more than one physical location. Now, when he is in a physical location, he tries to do the most damage possible. He defeated Eve in Genesis chapter 3. He won. He defeated David in 1 Chronicles 21. 1 Chronicles 21 is where he stands before David and tempts him to number the nation of Israel. And he does, right? And that's very much what the text says. In Acts chapter 5, he defeats Ananias. He came up against Ananias. That's where Peter said unto him, why has Satan filled thy heart to lie to the Holy Ghost? Okay? He defeated Ananias. He lost to Job. He lost to Job, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Right? Chapter 1, he says, no, he didn't curse you, Lord. Satan tried, came down there, took his kids, took his wealth, took everything. And he says, Lord, and he didn't curse you. But that's only because you didn't let me take him. You didn't let me mess with him. And the Lord says, okay, go try again. This time you can touch him. Just don't kill him. It's the only thing you can't do. Don't kill him. You can do anything else to him. And he does. I mean, he puts Job through the ringer again. Right? And Job, once again, didn't curse God with his lips. He tried. He tried to get Job to do that. Even to the point of leaving his wife completely alone, other than to put it in her ear to go tell your husband to curse God and die. Right? So everybody in the world that was either taken from him or against him, right? He had 3 friends that really weren't his friends, were they? I mean, his 3 friends came up to their man, and they started off fine, They sat down for a while and just let Job tell his story and vent and get some things off of his chest. And then by the end of Job, man, they are, by the end of their discourses, they're basically calling him the devil, right? Your kids died because you're a devil. Your wife has left you because you're a devil. Your wife has turned against you because you're wicked. All of those things. Man, boy, the devil will really do a number on you, right? He'll really do a number on you. But Job defeated him. Job won. Okay, so it's not impossible, right? Job defeated him. Jesus defeated him in Matthew chapter 4. Matthew chapter 4 is the temptation in the wilderness, right? Here he defeated Peter. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 23, he defeated Peter. And that's also found in Luke chapter 22, but he defeated Peter. This is where Jesus says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." He was ultimately rebuked by Jesus Christ. So he defeated Peter, but he didn't accomplish his mission. Okay? Jesus Christ rebuked him. But here he defeats Judas. Here he defeats Judas and enters into Judas. Up until this point, Judas was under his own volition, and he did not have to betray Jesus Christ. Up until this point. What happened with Judas? Judas gave place to the devil. You know that verse that says, "Neither give place to the devil"? Judas gave place to the devil. He allowed Satan to take an inch, right? He allowed the devil to set up a home base, right? And when he did that, Satan took over. See, he doesn't work and he doesn't do that. He doesn't take an inch, right? What's the saying? You give an inch, they take a mile, right? That's what the devil does. You give him a little bit with sin, right? And the sin doesn't take an inch. The sin takes over your life. All right. Verse 28. Chapter 13, verse 28. And he tells him in 27, "That thou doest do quickly." So he gives Satan a command. This is just like in Job when God told the devil what to do, right? As a matter of fact, God didn't just tell the devil what to do. God baited the devil and then told him what to do. I mean, he set a trap and he got him hook, line, and sinker, right? He was fishing and he got him. It was God who mentioned Job. And he says, "Hast thou considered my servant Job?" He was talking to Satan. Okay? Verse 28. "Now no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him." All right, so see, they were oblivious as to what was going on. They didn't know that Judas was leaving to betray Jesus Christ. Okay? They didn't know. They had no way of knowing. Right? There are some things that the Lord just withheld from the group, right? I mean, I think we went over the verses a couple weeks ago where it says, Jesus laid it out and says, they're going to take me, they're going to betray me, I'm going to die, and I'm going to come back. And it says, and they didn't understand what he was saying. They just had no clue. They just weren't, and it says because it was hidden from them, right? It just wasn't allowed, the Lord just hadn't allowed them to see some of those things quite yet. All right, so in 29, he says, "For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, and that Jesus had said unto him, buy those things that we have need against the feast, or that we should give something to the poor." Okay. Well, their logic was sound, wasn't it? Their logic was pretty sound, thinking that Judas was the one who had the money, so he would be the one to go get supplies, go get food, or do something for the poor. After all, that's what they did, didn't they? That's what they did. They gave money to the poor. They fed those people that were in need, right? They did that. They helped others, right? And remember, Judas was the treasurer. It says back in John chapter 12, verse 6, that he had the bag, right? He was the one who, they certainly weren't going to trust the publican with the money. That just wasn't going to happen, right? Who was the publican? Matthew. Levi, yes. Levi or Matthew. They certainly weren't going to trust the tax collector with the money. So who did they trust with the money? When it came down to it, they trusted Judas with the money. So again, up until this point, he was a trusted member of their discipleship. He was a trusted member of their 12, right? Of the fellowship, so to speak. He was a trusted member that they put actually a little bit more trust in than some of the others, right? They gave him a responsibility within the group to make sure that everybody... Now, see, where did they get the money? So this group was consisted of at least 3 commercial fishermen, right? And then you had Levi or Matthew, which was a publican. Does it say what the other ones were? Right off the top of your head? Was there 4 fishermen? Okay, so 4 fishermen. I'm missing one of them. Andrew, okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense. You know, I had the Zebedee brothers and Andrew. And so, And then, so you had the 4 fishermen, and then you had Matthew Levi, who was a publican. It doesn't really tell us what the other ones did. But they were with Jesus, so they weren't out making money. They followed him. He said, stop what you're doing and follow me, right? He says, drop the nets, let's go. And they're like, can we go tell our dad? No, he says, let's go, follow me, right? So they weren't doing that. They weren't doing anything to make money. So how did they have money? Donations, offerings. Look, I'll tell you what, when you heal somebody, they'll throw money at you. They will. I have a guy that I won't call him a friend, I'll call him an acquaintance, a guy that I know. He has the gift of healing. And not this apostolic gift where, he just throws his jacket or hat, smacks you on the head, and all your ailments are gone, right? It's not that kind of healing. He knows the human body so well that he knows the way God has created it, and he uses the body to heal itself, right? And he just has this gift, this touch, right? I don't understand it, right? But it's special. Wendy knows who I'm talking about. His name's Morris. It's something special, man. He since he doesn't actually have a medical license, he doesn't charge. So he doesn't do chiropractic. He does muscle and massage, and if something happens to pop or whatever in the process of his massage, he does reflexology. He does massage. He does kind of these things of having your body reset itself, right? Whether through cleanses, whether through manipulation of your muscles, whether through, a whole 9 yards. He's got a whole bunch of techniques, okay? And he doesn't charge a thing. You can go into his clinic and wait for an opportunity to go and see him, and he doesn't charge anything. He's got a tip bottle at the end. And he does not have a need for money. Because when you help somebody, when somebody is in pain, chronic pain. He told the story of a kid who was young and stupid, and maybe there was a little alcohol involved, where he jumped from the second-story balcony of his hotel room into the pool that didn't have any water in it. Okay? Alcohol was involved. Okay? Or something. Right? The doctors told him you're never going to walk right again. They broke his back in like 8 or 9 places, broke both of his legs in a couple different places, broke all sorts of ribs, and had a fractured skull. I mean, the whole 9 yards. He's in real bad shape. Well, after all the surgeries and after all the doctors says there's nothing we can, all the rehab said there's nothing we can do, he's like, I'll try anything. He went and saw Morris. And he says it didn't happen overnight. Took him about 8 months for him to get him to be able to stand up and walk the way he was supposed to stand up and walk. You mean to tell me, and the guy walks normal now, right? You mean to tell me that guy didn't throw money at Mr. Hartman? Of course he did, right? He says you don't have to charge anything. When you really heal somebody, you don't have to charge them. They will throw their life savings at you if they're really sick and hurting. I mean, that's why all these faith healers you can tell they're fake. These faith healers are fake. What do? They charge admission at the door for you to come see them. You don't need to charge admission at the door. You really heal somebody, they'll throw money at you, right? Why? I guarantee you, if God gave me the ability to heal sicknesses, and I went into any major city and went into the children's cancer ward and went, you're healed, 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 I promise you, I wouldn't have to buy dinner that night, or the next night, or the next night, or the next night, or the next night. They're going to take care of me, right? Why? Because people are sick. People do anything to stay alive, right? They realize, especially when you save their kid. That kid is worth way more than anything else they got, right? I mean, you'd never have to buy anything again. You'd be rich. You'd be rich. And other oncology wards would be calling you. Other hospitals would be calling you. Come to my hospital. Come to my hospital. Come to my hospital. They don't do that. And you know what their excuse is? Oh, well, your faith must be, it's your faith. Your faith must not be where it needs to be since you didn't get healed. When someone doesn't get healed, it's not the faith. Do you remember when they're trying to cast out the devil? And they said, you're doing it wrong. That's why. You're the problem. Not him. He's not the problem. You're the problem. He says, only by prayer and fasting does that one come out. It's the faith of the person doing the healing that is tested. The healing is supposed to be a sign for all those that are around you to believe. That's why they did those apostolic signs. We're not like that today. That's not the way it works, which is why nobody here has the power of healing the way the apostles did and the way Jesus Christ did. So, anyway, sorry I got off on a little tangent right there. They were oblivious to what Jesus Christ was telling Judas to do, and it made sense because Judas had the bag, and for some reason they just thought he was going to do what he needed to do with the money. John chapter 13, verse 30. And he hath receiving the sop went immediately out, and it was night. Okay, so Judas went off to do the devil's bidding, and it was at night. That's important. I mean, because when they did the meal, it was evening. So some time has passed here, and you ever hear the saying, "Nothing good happens after midnight"? Right? Because men love darkness rather than light. Right? Look at Proverbs chapter 7. Proverbs chapter 7. Let's start at verse 6. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement, and beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding, passing through the street near her corner, when he went away to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. And behold, there I met a woman with the attire of an harlot and subtle of heart. I mean, it goes on through there talking about how there's a harlot on every corner, and those people who go after her are devoid of understanding, right? Nothing good happens at night. Turn to Job. Couple books back. Job chapter 24. Job 24:15. The eye also of the adulterer waiteth for twilight, saying, no eye shall see me, and disguiseth his face. In the dark they dig through houses which they had marked for themselves in the daytime, for they know not light. You see what that says? The people who are coming to do harm, they scope the place out in the daytime where they can see, but their evil deeds are done at night. Right? They mark the place and to return at night. Okay? So back to John chapter 13. So nothing good happens at night. And he sent Judas off to do his bidding. He sent Judas off to do what he was supposed to do, and it just happens to mention that it was night. Okay, John chapter 13, verse 31. Therefore, when he was gone out, Jesus says, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God be glorified in him, God shall also glorify him in himself, and shall straightway glorify him. Okay, so this is a kind of an odd statement, because at this point Jesus is not yet glorified. In the way, right? Okay, it might be the beginning of his glorification, but he's not glorified until he's lifted up on the cross. That's when God says he's been glorified, right? He hasn't been glorified yet. He's glorified in the sense that everything is in motion for him to go to the cross. Okay? Everything is in place. Do you remember three times, I give you three examples earlier in the Gospels of John where he says, my time has not yet come. My time has not yet come. My time is not yet. Right? They tried to take him more than one time. They tried to kill him more than one time. They tried to take him more than one time. And one of the times they tried to make him king. Right? And he says, my time is not yet. Mine hour is not yet. My hour is not yet come. His hour has come. Everything is in motion now. It's going to happen. Now remember when we started John chapter 13, I said this is really the last 24 hours of Jesus' life, right? From here to chapter 19 is really the last 24 hours of his life. Okay? Look at verse 33. Verse 33, and it says, little children, yet a little while I am with you. Ye seek me, and as I said unto the Jews, whither I go, ye cannot come. So now I say to you. Okay. So do you remember when he said that? Whether you go, you cannot come? That's when he was talking to the Jews. That's when he was talking to the scribes and Pharisees. And he was talking in parables and in ways to confuse them because they didn't want to know the truth. They didn't want a knowledge of the truth. So he made it to where they couldn't understand it unless they really dug into it and found out tried to figure out what the Lord was trying to say. Okay? So now he's telling it to his disciples. So he refers to his disciples as little children. This is interesting because most of them were older than Jesus. As a matter of fact, I would dare say all of them were older than Jesus. John the Baptist was about the same age as Jesus before he died, right? They were about the same age, just a couple months apart. Me and Dutch were talking that John was probably pretty close to the age of Jesus, being the younger of the Zebedee brothers, but everyone else was more than likely older than Jesus Christ, and he refers to them as little children. Okay? That's not an insult. Okay? Remember what he says, suffer not the little ones to come unto me. Right? And then he talks about having faith as a little child, right? How that's, you need that. You need that faith as a little child. It wasn't meant here as an insult. It was meant as they call him master, right? They were underneath him in every way. And that's when we talked last week about how the servant is not greater than the master. He was the master. He was the author and finisher. The rest of them were, at this point, triers. Really, they're triers. Okay? So this was not an insult, and most of them were actually older than him, right? He says he's going to go where none of them can go, at least for a little while, right? And he's going, where he's going, they cannot follow. Where is that? That's the grave. They can't follow him to the grave, at least not yet. Okay? Verse 34. Where did I go? Did I jump something? 13:33, 34. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. Okay, he gives them a new commandment. This is to love one another in the way that he loved them, right? That is a perfect, selfless love. In John, 1 John chapter 3, verse 23, John reiterates this command. He gives it again. He adds something to the beginning of it, but he says this again, and he says, "As and love each other as Jesus loved us, as I have commanded you." Right? That's what he's talking about. Is this reference to John chapter 13? That's in 1 John chapter 3, verse 23. Right? Romans chapter 13, verse 10 says, "Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law." Right? Now, if you read 13:34, it says, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another." This command is easy to say. Oh, I love all my brothers. I love all my brothers and sisters in Christ. It's really easy to say. It's really difficult to fulfill. Right? Do you love the brethren? I mean, yes is the right answer, But do you really love the brethren? All of them? Because some of them are easier to love than others. And that's just the truth, right? That's my flesh getting in the way of the command to love all my brethren. Some of you guys, man, I love you all to death. Some of the brethren, man, are so much easier to love than some of the other ones. Okay? That's not to say they're not worthy of the love, because Jesus Christ says, love your brothers like you've loved me, or I have loved them, right? It's easy to command. It's easy to say, yeah, I love the brethren, but we don't fulfill that. That's a commandment God gave us. Jesus Christ gave us. Now, have you ever knowingly or blatantly tried to damage or hurt a brother? Then you don't love them. You don't love them. You say you love somebody, but then you knowingly or willingly do something to cause them harm or damage. That's not love. Not the way Jesus Christ loved us. You know, one of the biggest complaints, one of the biggest hindrances to people from the outside world coming into the church is that they've all been wronged by a Christian. Right? They see the hypocrisy in the church. Sorry, I got something in my throat. I can't seem to help doing that. But they all have this hypocrisy that comes from within the church, right? And the way you kind of have to change your mentality to get around this is you have to acknowledge that that's true. Don't try to defend the brethren, because they probably really were wronged by a brother or sister. But you know who never did them any wrong? Jesus Christ. That's how you look. You know what? You're right. He probably did do you wrong, and he's probably going to end up having to pay for that someday. But you know who's never done me wrong in a church? The preacher might have done me wrong. The deacon might have done me wrong. The secretary might have done me wrong. The person passing around the offering plate might have looked at me funny when I didn't have anything to give, right? You know, whatever. Doesn't matter. That probably all really did happen. But you know who never did you any wrong? Jesus Christ. So why would you not come to honor and worship the one who's never wronged you? But you hold it against the people that are there, right? I mean, a coworker's wronged you. Do you just not show up to work? I wish that was the case. Every time someone irritated me at work, I'd just not show up. I'd never go to work. I'd be home by 12 every day. Right? That's just not the way it works. Okay? So, if you knowingly or blatantly hurt somebody that you love, or say you love, that's not love. Loving someone means going out of your way not to cause them harm, or to take the harm yourself so they don't feel the harm, right? To protect them. I love my wife. I'll do anything that I can to protect her. Do I wrong her? Sure. I don't blatantly wrong her or cause her harm. That's not an intent, right? That's a byproduct of me being me, right? Being human, right? It's my job to protect my wife and my children, right? That's love. All right, verse 35. But this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, that ye love, if ye love one another. Verse 36. 35 is how we really show everybody that what we say is true, right? Okay. Verse 36. Simon Peter said unto him, Lord, whither thou goest? And Jesus answered him, Whither I go, I canst not follow. Thou canst not follow me now, but thou shalt follow me afterwards. So Simon Peter, never fails, Simon Peter pipes up, and he asks a question that Jesus Christ already answered, right? He's going where you can't follow, at least not yet, right? Now the Bible doesn't tell us what happened to all the disciples and the apostles, but tradition and history does. Simon Peter was crucified upside down. Andrew, crucified on an X-shaped cross in Greece. James, beheaded by the sword at the hands of Herod in 44 AD. That's in the Bible. We do get that one from the Scripture, right? That's James Zebedee. John, we get this one too. He was boiled in oil. And then when that didn't kill him, they exiled him to Patmos. That's where he got the vision and wrote the book of Revelation. Okay? Now, we don't know how he died. We just kind of have to assume natural causes or as a result of his injuries afterwards. Okay? That's it. Right? Philip, the stories vary. He was either crucified or he was stoned in Asia Minor, depending on what source you go through. Thomas was speared to death in India. A spear right through him. Matthew. Death by sword. He died by the sword in Ethiopia. He was killed by a sword. James. Oh boy. James was thrown from the temple pinnacle in Jerusalem, and when he didn't die, they stoned him. When he didn't die, they clubbed him. Whew. Oh boy. Thaddeus. This one varies too. He was either struck with arrows or an axe. And the location varies too. It's either Armenia or Lebanon, or there's a couple other places too that this possibly happened. But some stories say he was shot through with arrows, and other things he was chopped up with an axe. Okay, Simon. Simon was said to be cut in half in Persia. What a way to go. Cut you in half. Judas betrayed Jesus and hung himself. Bartholomew. This one varies too, but the most prevalent one was that he was flayed alive in Armenia. That means they cut the skin from his body while he was screaming. Okay? Now that's the disciples. There are some other ones that we know of. I mean, Mark. Mark was dragged through the streets of Alexandria, Egypt, until he was dead. Luke was hanged in Greece. And Matthias was the one who replaced Judas. It varies, but they say he was either stoned or he was beheaded. One of the two. Now, he did say, where I go, you're not going to follow me. Yet. Everyone that followed Jesus died a gruesome fate. And to the end, they stayed faithful. Whew, man. That's what Paul was saying when he said, I press towards the mark, right? Paul was beheaded in Rome by Nero, right? We're reading through that in 2 Timothy, right? The last book that he wrote when we're in there. So, man, I tell you what, when someone says being a Christian's easy, there's a cost. I mean, has anybody ever read Martyr's Mirror or Fox's Book of Martyrs? Oh, my goodness. I mean, I read through stuff like that. I ain't got no problems. I mean, I don't remember who it was, but I remember that they didn't kill her. They put her on a seat that had arrowheads poking up, so she was sitting strapped to a seat that had arrows or spikes in it. And her daughter was across the way from her, and she was sitting on a solid cast iron seat, and underneath they were stoking a fire underneath that cast iron. So the mom had to watch her daughter being roasted alive, being pan-seared, so to speak. And all the while, this is according to Fox's Book of Martyrs, all the while the daughter is not saying, Mama, help me, Mama, help me, Mama, help me. The daughter is saying, Mama, don't do it. What were they trying to get Mama to do? Renounce Jesus Christ. Mama, don't do it. Mama, don't do it. Mama, no. Don't forsake him. Don't forsake him. She's getting burned alive. She's getting literally fried to death. And that little girl, now it wasn't little, she was a young girl. Wasn't like a 5-year-old or something like that. She was, I would say, teenage or older. Was telling Mama, don't forsake Jesus. Don't forsake Christ. Don't give up on God. Whew, boy, I ain't got no problems. that happened time and time and time and time and time again in Rome. They were persecuted. Christians were persecuted. Why? Jesus Christ. There's a cost to discipleship. Now, we don't have that here in today's society. It's very, very rare that something like that happens. I mean, it just happened to happen this past week where somebody was shot for their beliefs, right? And he was a advocate for Jesus Christ, right? But man, there's going to come a time we're all going to die, right? And he says to his disciples, you can't quite follow me yet. All right, let's look at let's see if we can get through chapter 13, 37. Peter said unto him, Lord, why cannot I follow thee? I will lay down my life for thy sake. Now, Simon Peter, man, he was rough around the edges, but man, was he zealous for the Lord, right? Peter said this, and I believe he said it meaning it. I believe that, right? He was willing to fight and die for Jesus Christ. The garden is an example of that. What did he do? They were coming to take him, and he drew his sword, went full-fledged fighting mode, and Jesus stopped him. Right? Jesus saved his life. Is what he did. Right? But anyway, he was willing to fight and die for Jesus because he was ignorant of the circumstances that he was in. And when I say ignorant, I don't mean stupid. I mean he just didn't have all of the information that was available to him. He didn't process it properly. He improperly judged himself in regard to these situations. Right? His intentions were always good. Peter, man, he always wanted to do good for the Lord, didn't he? Every time. Lord, I'm not going to let this happen. What does he say? Get thee behind me, Satan. Because this is what he was called to do, Jesus. This is what he was fulfilling Scripture. And Peter says, I'm not going to let that happen. Do you remember just earlier in the chapter where he says, I'm washing your guys' feet? And Peter says, you're not washing my feet, Lord. That's not going to happen. And he says, well, if you're not going to let me wash your feet, you're not one of mine. He says, don't just wash my feet, wash my head and my hands too. Just wash me, Lord. See, his intentions were always good, just out of place, right? He was ignorant of the circumstances and the context of some of these things. All right. So then in 38, he says, and Jesus answered him, wilt thou lay down my life for my sake? That's what he's just repeating what Peter says. He says, oh yeah? Oh yeah, Peter? Well, you're going to lay down your life for my sake? He says, verily, verily, I say unto thee, the cock shall not crow till thou hast denied me thrice. And Jesus says, oh yeah? You think so? You're really going to lay down your life for me? Look outside, Peter, it's dark. By morning, you'll have forsaken me 3 times. Now to Peter, that was a slap across the face, man. Peter's like, not so, Lord. I mean, that was his attitude. I'm not letting anything happen to you. I'm willing to die for you. And then Jesus turns around and says, nope, that's not true. You're going to die for me, just not yet. But before the sun comes up, before that rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. Now, Peter thought, that's impossible. I can just imagine how Peter would have thought that would have been impossible. I mean, he was the one who was willing to fight for Jesus Christ, wasn't he? I mean, Thomas said it earlier. He says, well, if he's going back, let's go back and die with him. That was in regards to Lazarus. When they were going back to visit Lazarus, right? Jesus foretells of Peter's denial. Now, this actually takes place in John chapter 18. It's weird in John chapter 18. It's like in 15 and 16, and then it skips up until 25 to 27. So John is going back and forth between the trial and Peter forsaking Jesus, okay? So you can also find it in Matthew chapter 26, verses 69 to 75. Mark chapter 14, 66 to 72. So that's Matthew 26, 69 to 75. Mark 14, 66 to 72, and we're going to read the Luke account, Luke 22. Luke 22. Because I think it adds some context that we don't get here. Okay? Luke 22. 54. Luke 22, 54. Then they took him and led him and brought him into the high priest's house, and Peter followed afar off. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the hall and were set down together, Peter sat down among them. Okay, so he's in the congregation of the mock trial that's going on. Okay. But a certain maid beheld him as he sat by the fire, and earnestly looked upon him, and said, "This man was also with him." So she's piping up and saying, if you're going to try him, Peter, this guy right here, is one of his disciples and follows him. And he denied him, saying, "Woman, I know him not." There's one. And after a little while he saw another, while another saw him and said, "Thou art also of them." And Peter said, "Man, I am not." And about the space of 1 hour after, another confidently affirmed, saying, "Of a truth, this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean." And Peter said, "Man, I know not what thou sayest." And immediately, while he yet spake, the cock crew. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter. You know what that means? That means the Lord knew Peter was there. He saw him. And then he heard that rooster crow, and then he went, "Oh yeah, Peter?" Peter didn't think that was funny. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he has said unto him, "Before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice." And Peter went out and wept bitterly. Boy, that destroyed Peter. That just absolutely ripped the guts out of Peter. Because he was the one who said, "Lord, I'm going to die for you. They're not going to take you. I'm going to kill every single one of them. That's not going to happen." And he says, "Are you serious about that? You're willing to do that? All right, let's see." He says, "But I know what's going to happen, Peter." He says, "You're not going to lay down your life for me. Not yet. But before the morning comes, you're going to deny me 3 times. All right, that's John chapter 13. Any questions through John? John 13 so far. All right, John 14. We only got a few minutes left, so we're not really going to get into it. But John 14 to 16. John 14 to 16 take place after Jesus leaves the upper room and while he is on his way to the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay, so the group is traveling and he's just talking to them, right? So chapters 13 to chapters 19 all take place within the last 24 hours of Jesus' life. That's a third of the entire gospel by chapter, okay? So 7 chapters, there's 24 chapters in the gospel, right? No, 28. There's 28 chapters in John. So 7 chapters, so a third, okay, is devoted to the last 24 hours of his earthly life. All right? So when we get into John chapter 14, we're going to get a lot of new stuff that the disciples have not heard before. And it's going to radically change some things. All right? So we're not going to get into it today. We'll pick it up next week. Any questions so far? All right, Brother Aaron, would you pray for us, please?